And welcome to another edition of Speak Your Piece. I am Mac Watson, and today I've got a very special guest in studio. It is wonderful to finally meet her in person, the representative from the state of Wyoming, Harriet Hageman. Representative, how are you doing today? Thank you for coming in.
It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
So let's find out, why are you in KODI? What brings you to KODI this day?
Well, we have several meetings, and the Wyoming Mining Association is meeting here, and obviously I want to spend time with those folks to talk about what's happening back in D.C. and what I can do to make sure that I'm representing that industry and pushing back against the radical Biden agenda. And then I also will be going to Worland. They're going to be having their Lincoln Day dinner tomorrow night, so I am excited and honored to be able to go over and spend some time with the folks in Washakie County.
Okay. So once again, you're here because you're meeting the people, meeting constituents. You really did fulfill that campaign promise you made, a while back, in that you were going to come back and host town halls and you were going to meet with people. You've still done that. Why is that so important to you?
I go to different communities on a very regular basis. In fact, I was just in Worland last week for a Memorial Day ceremony and in 10 Sleep in Sheridan and different places in Douglas. But I think that town halls are very unique and a very special way for me to be able to interact with my constituency. So when I ran for office, I promised that I would hold a town hall at every county every year. Last year, I completed that by the end of June. This year, it's taking me a little bit longer simply because we've had a pretty busy schedule back in Washington, D.C. But so far, I've been able to do 14 town halls, and I will finish the rest hopefully by the end of August. But it gives me an opportunity for me to give a brief summary of what I've been doing. But then most of the town hall is spent answering questions and interacting with my constituents, so I know what's on their mind and can better represent them.
Now, tonight or this weekend, is this open to anybody? I know you mentioned a couple of things, but is it open to anybody that they can come in KODI and see you and meet with you? Or is it kind of closed to only like mining people and stuff like that?
Well, it is the Wyoming Mining Association convention. It's open, whether people would like to go attend that or not. It's going to be addressing the mining issues that we're facing in Wyoming. I'm not doing a town hall while I'm here this time. I am going to be doing town halls. My next couple of town halls are going to be, I believe, in Gillette for Campbell County and then Crook County. I think that's about 10 days from now. I'm going to be doing those.
Okay.
I did a town hall in Sheridan last week. I did one in Douglas last Friday. So again, I come into the communities quite a bit, but the town halls are a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. Representative Harriet Hageman joins me on Speak Your Piece. Let's go kind of a timeline. Let's move backwards, if you will. In D.C., you have been an ardent opponent, if you will, against the Biden administration and what they've been doing. Start with Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland is in a really weird position. It was found out, or you tell the story, it was found out that they're spying on our bank accounts. How did that all come about?
So we had Merrick Garland in front of the Judiciary Committee just this last week, on Tuesday of this week. And part of our role in Congress is oversight of the executive branch and these administrative agencies, including the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, FBI, whatever it may be. So he came in for us to question him about what's going on within the Department of Justice. And over the last couple of months, we have learned that the Department of Justice and the IRS are potentially spying on our bank records. And where this came about was an undercover video of a gentleman who used to work for the IRS. He has since been let go, but he disclosed the fact that the IRS and DOJ have access through artificial intelligence. They're using AI to access all of our bank accounts. The purpose being to ensure that we're paying the right amount of taxes. So if you'll remember when the Biden administration said they needed 87,000 new IRS agents, but they're not going to go after anybody under 400, making under 400,000 and blah, 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 blah. That's not what this gentleman says. What this gentleman says is that they intentionally target low-income and middle-income people because they don't have the ability to defend themselves. So Jim Jordan and I sent a letter to Merrick Garland.
He's another representative from Ohio.
Yes, he is. And we sent an oversight letter to Merrick Garland and the IRS demanding information about this program and what they're doing. So when I questioned him on Tuesday, the first thing that I did is get him to admit that if they are en masse spying on our bank accounts to determine how much money's coming in, what the source of that revenue is, what we're spending our money on all of those things, I said that clearly would be a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and he agreed with that. And then I said, just last week, we received a letter from you that was very unsatisfying because it did not answer our questions. So I requested that he follow up and actually provide us with information about the nature of this program, whether they're doing it, if so, know how this came about and what we're going to do to stop it. So that was one of the areas that I questioned him on. The other area that I keep questioning these agency heads on is they keep acting as though they're trying to protect us. An example being, the Department of Homeland Security. They want to protect us from any kind of threats, both foreign and domestic.
Right.
And you've got the same thing with the Department of Interior. We're protecting our environment. Yet what is going on our southern border is affecting every single one of these agencies. Merrick Garland just on Tuesday testified that the level of threat for a domestic terrorist action has skyrocketed because of that open border.
And what does that mean specifically?
Well, they recognize that there are people who want to do us ill who have crossed that border. They know it. They know it. There are almost 2 million gotaways. They have about 9 million people who have come across that they have been processing. There are almost 2 million gotaways. So those are the people who don't want to be caught. Those are the people that are coming. We know that we've got people coming from Jordan and Iraq and Iran and China and all of these countries that bode us ill will. And
when you say do us harm and bode us ill will, are we talking about another 9/11? Are we talking about a terrorist attack? Or are we talking about something different?
I think we're talking about potentially a 9/11 or an October 7th. And I think that the October 7th right now is a higher risk than even a 9/11. The 9/11 took such an incredible amount of planning, took years to plan, the training, getting him in here, getting embedded. Right now, you look at what happened on October 7th in Israel, and that's the fear that I have.
I see.
That's what I have, is that you have 27 people, 47 people embedded in communities around the country.
Yeah.
When they are told to move, they're going to move, and they're going to create as much mayhem as they possibly can. And these are people these are suicide missions, and I believe that that's exactly what Merrick Garland recognizes as well. But he's still unwilling to talk to President Biden and Mayorkas about closing that border.
Now, is that because he knows does he have the power that he can't? So it's kind of like a moot point?
Well, they all have the power. They all have the power to go to the president and say, look, you're putting every man, woman, and child in the United States at risk by having an open border.
Okay.
You have the Department of Interior, again, talking about her, the head of the Department of Interior. On average, every illegal that has crossed that border has brought 8 pounds of trash with them. Okay, if there are 11 million illegals that have crossed that border, we're talking about 90 million pounds of trash. Our rivers and streams are being destroyed. Our environment is being destroyed. Our BLM lands are being destroyed. And yet here is Deb Haaland, the head of the Department of Interior, saying, well, I don't know anything about it. I guess it's kind of bad, but I'm not going to say anything. It's not my jurisdiction. And that's the answer I keep getting from these yahoos is, well, it's not my jurisdiction. That's not my responsibility. These are American citizens. They are the head of agencies. They are cabinet level positions. It absolutely is their responsibility to go to the president of the United States and saying, you are putting American citizens at risk by refusing to close that border.
Okay, so there's so much to touch on, but let me get specific just with the border issue, and then we'll go back to Merrick Garland real quick. You've talked to Mayorkas. You've grilled Mayorkas. I loved watching it, by the way. Why is he not doing his job? Do you think it is a literal Joe Biden telling him, hey, just lay off? Or is it something else? Why won't he do his job?
Well, I wish I could say that Joe Biden was telling anybody what to do, but Joe Biden is suffering from such severe dementia. He's not the one who's in charge.
Okay.
I think that this is intentional. This is a catch and release program. This is an open border mentality. This is the agenda of the Biden administration.
To what end? And for what purpose?
I think for a couple of reasons. One, right now, and one of the bills that I'm a co-sponsor of is a bill that would not count illegal aliens when we redistrict. Right now, if you're an illegal, you can't vote, but you are counted for redistricting purposes. So if they're sending another 3 million people to New York or another 5 million people to California or another 4 million people to Miami or to Illinois, even though it's putting immense pressure on those communities in terms of the cost and the impact, those people will be counted in the 2030 census to determine what areas get federal representation, how many members of Congress will represent those states. And keep in mind, with this last census, California and New York both lost representatives, and Florida and Texas gained.
Right.
And so this is about this is about, number one, making sure that they can redistrict to get the more liberal states more representation in Congress. But the other thing is that they're going to attempt to make all of these people citizens. So the 11 million,
right.
the 20 million, the 30 million people who are in this country right now illegal, and there are people who estimate as many as 40 million people are living in this country right now who are illegal.
Yeah.
The Democrats are going to do everything in their power to make it so that they become legal citizens so that they can vote. And then at that point, Wyoming becomes irrelevant, Nebraska becomes irrelevant, Montana becomes irrelevant. Most of your western states become irrelevant because all of the power is going to be even further stockpiled in your coastal states.
East and West Coast. Okay.
Yep.
My guest today on Speak Your Piece is the representative from Wyoming, U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. We're going to have more Speak Your Piece coming up on KODI. Speak Your Piece continues now with my guest in studio, Harriet Hageman, the representative from Wyoming. We're talking all things about Wyoming, about D.C. So let me ask you, we're continuing our conversation about the border, and then I want to get back to Merrick Garland real quick. Tell me, as a person who was born and raised in Wyoming as yourself, why should we care what goes on the border? We're thousands of miles away. How does the border crisis affect Wyoming?
It affects every single person in this country. I've visited the border 3 times now. I've been to Yuma, I've been to Eagle Pass, Texas, and I've been in the Tucson sector. And I'm just going to give you 3 stories from each one of those places. In Yuma, as you and I were talking about before we went on the air, they're destroying our crops. And there are times a year when the majority of the food that fresh fruit and vegetables that we eat in this country come from Yuma, Arizona.
Lettuce capital of the United States.
Lettuce, broccoli, onion, celery, lots of different things. And with the illegal aliens, they're literally destroying those fields, and they have to destroy the crops.
And the mayor can't do anything to stop them.
And over a year and a half ago, they had almost their hospital had over almost $30 million in unfunded liabilities, uncompensated care, because of the number of women coming there and men, the number of injuries that they're having to treat.
Right.
And the federal government refuses to compensate them. When we were at Eagle Pass, Texas, we learned that the cartels are earning almost $35 million a week in that one sector. Do the math, that's $1.6 billion a year in human trafficking just in that one sector.
So these are people who pay the cartels to get
across.
them?
You can't come across unless you pay a cartel. And it's anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 to $15,000, depending on who you are, where you're coming from. So, as an example, when we were in Yuma, I was standing out there with one of the police officers, and he pointed out an area of the wall that had not been built.
Yeah.
And he said, "We found about 200 bodies right over there." And I said, "Why would you be finding bodies there? This is where you're processing people." And he said, "Because they tried to make it across the border without paying the cartels, and the cartels kill them, and then they leave their bodies out there for everybody else."
Wow.
Then when I went to the Tucson sector, they talked about the amount of fentanyl coming in. Fentanyl is at its lowest price ever, because that's how much fentanyl is flooding into our market, number one. And in this one sector, they had 70,000 people come across 2 years ago, and now we have over 800,000 people coming across in just that one sector. I have met with the IG for the Department of Homeland Security. There are over 85,000 children that our DHS and HHS have lost, unaccompanied minors that have come across that border. In addition to which, right now, the HHS is allowing non-relatives come and pick up 10 to 15 kids at a time at these processing centers, these unaccompanied minors. They're showing up in vans, and they're picking up 10 to 15 kids at a time, and DHS and HHS are allowing them to take them. What does that mean? That's sex trafficking. That's human trafficking. That's pedophilia.
Right.
And our government is the one that's doing it. Our federal government is involved in sex trafficking of children.
Yeah.
There's a new documentary that just came out on this. The impact on our jobs. Do you know all of the job gains over the last year have gone to illegal aliens? That metric just came out this week. The study has been done that almost 100% of the jobs that we have gained in the last year have gone to illegal aliens, not
so that's
citizens.
low-paying hourly wage.
Jobs, that's right. And it's suppressing wages for everybody else. On top of that, you've got this incredible inflationary pressure related to the fact that they have failed energy policy, failed housing policy, failed federal land policy, failed timber policy. I mean, you could go on and on and on. The housing situation in these communities is just absolutely dire. You look at what's happening in Denver. There's that beautiful hospital out east of town, the Anschutz facility. They're going bankrupt because of the uncompensated care. It affects every single person in our communities. It affects our our schools. It affects our hospitals. It affects our social services. It affects our Medicaid. It affects every single thing that people in this country depend upon. And it is only getting worse. And the executive order that Joe Biden issued this week is absolutely irrelevant. It has no teeth whatsoever. It will do nothing.
Yeah, it's laughable. It's really laughable. Is. You know, you and I are of a particular age. We remember when Ronald Reagan waved the wand of immunity for 2 million people.
11
million people. They came out of the shadows. They were citizens. And so people or illegal immigrants have been counting on that ever since. It wasn't solved then. It's not solved now. How do you solve it, and what does it take?
So one of the things that the mistake that Ronald Reagan made, and he was a great, great president, but he believed the Democrats and Tip O'Neill when they said, if you give us amnesty, we will give you border security. He said that, and that's one of the things that people try to conflate. They conflate border security with amnesty and immigration. They're not the same thing. Border security should be an absolute, and we should all be able to demand border security just as any other country does, whether it is Canada or England or France or whatever it is. They demand border security. They enforce border security. And what the Democrats want to do is they want to conflate the two and say, well, but we need amnesty. What do we do with all these illegals?
Right.
We can't close the border, but here's my view of it. You close the border, then we can talk. But until you close the border, you cannot do amnesty. And that was the mistake Ronald Reagan made, is he trusted them. So that's why H.R. 2 is such a good bill. The bill that we passed a year ago out of the House of Representatives is it forces border security, and then you can deal with immigration as a separate issue. In addition to which, we have plenty of laws on the books dealing with immigration.
If you just enforce them.
If you just enforce them. We don't need additional laws to enforce the laws we already have on the books.
Right.
We have the parole statute is very, very, very clear. You cannot do mass parole into our country. It is done on a case-by-case basis. An example being that a family of 5 comes over from Mexico, and the little boy needs to get a medical treatment. They can parole the family into the United States for the purpose of taking him to the hospital, but then when that treatment's done, then they have to go back across the border. That is a case-by-case parole. Biden has been mass paroling millions of people, entire categories of people, Venezuelans, Colombians, Iraqis. He has been
Iraqis?
He has been mass paroling.
Oh, not just Central America.
Oh gosh, no.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Oh, gosh, no. Cuba.
Okay.
He's been mass paroling entire categories of people into our country. That's one thing. The other thing is if you are going to seek asylum, you must come through a port of entry. And you are not allowed into the country until your asylum claim is resolved.
Right.
Well, what they're doing is catch and release. And if you are coming across illegally, you are not entitled to asylum. There is nothing that can happen, whether it's 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 7 years from now. If you came into this country illegally, you are not entitled to asylum. Yet they're giving them notices to appear and saying, please come and appear in 2032, and we're going to resolve whether you can seek asylum. They can't, by definition. So the laws are already on the books from an immigration standpoint, but we need the border security.
What is the difference between somebody coming in from the East Coast from Russia or some other country from like Europe that seeks asylum and the people coming from Central America or Iraq from the southern border? Are the laws different?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I show up in New York and I'm from Russia and I want asylum. Is the process the same as the southern border?
Yes, it is. And that's the other thing that I don't know if your listeners were aware of, but most likely are. They have brought in almost 350,000 people by flying them into the country, and they're doing that to avoid the border situation. So they're flying them into Newark, New Jersey. They're flying them into Chicago, Illinois, and then they're processing them as asylum seekers, even though they're not entitled to asylum.
How do they get here without a passport or anything?
Because they're chartering the planes to bring them in. Keep in
Oh.
mind, also, I travel extensively. As you can imagine, I'm in an airport almost every single week. They have separate lines for illegals. You go to Southern California, you go to the Palm Springs, you go to the airport, you'll see a separate security line for the people that are illegals. And you know they're illegals because they all have plastic folders in their hands with all of the paperwork that they have. When you get on a plane, you know who the illegals are that are coming onto the plane that they're flying around the country.
Where are they going?
I don't know.
To the interior
Denver?
of the United States, or are they going back home?
Because I'm usually they're flying into the country. Because I'm usually from Palm Springs. I'd be flying to Denver.
Yeah.
So they're on a flight from Palm Springs to Denver. They're not sending them back south. They're not sending them back to the Middle East.
Right.
Right now, we've got tens of thousands of Chinese crossing that border.
Yeah.
Chinese.
Yeah.
What in the world? And when you ask them, the reporters are saying, "What are you coming here for?" They don't say they're coming here for asylum. They say, "I'm coming here for a job.
Right.
I'm coming here for
a better life.
A better life."
Yeah.
That doesn't qualify.
Why would, after 9/11, after what we know now, why would any president take a chance that something like that could happen on his watch or her watch? Why would they take that chance and not just address the issue?
What I have to say to you is watch the recent testimony of Mayorkas and the recent testimony of Merrick Garland and the recent testimony of Christopher Wray with the FBI. And all three of them have said there is a much heightened risk of a terrorism attack now because of the open border than there ever has been.
Right. But
they
why
don't care. The ends justify the means. I wish it wasn't that brutal. I wish it wasn't that brutal. I wish it wasn't that simple, but it is. When you are the head of the FBI, the head of the Department of Justice, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, and you know that there are people who are terrorists that are coming into this country who have the ability to do an attack like we saw on October 7th, and you refuse to talk to the president, you refuse to demand that border be closed, you refuse to do something about it, the only thing that you can say from a very cynical standpoint is that the ends justify the means.
Right. That's the only way you can stay employed, I guess, or get up in the morning and do your job, right? We're talking with Harriet Hageman, the representative from Wyoming. We're going to have more Speak Your Piece coming up right here on KODI. All right, time now, 9:36. Speak Your Piece continues on KODI with my guest in studio, the representative from Wyoming, Harriet Hageman, who is in town again for a
Wyoming Mining Association meeting and then an opportunity to meet with constituents.
Okay. And we're so glad that she stopped in because we're talking about all this stuff. And I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on in D.C. You have been one of the most vocal critics, especially of the Biden administration's, let's just call it what it is, the war on the fossil fuel industry. I have always maintained I don't mind renewables. I don't mind having choices. Why is the Biden administration so dead set on this or this? We can't have both. Why are they so against the fossil fuel industry?
One of the things that I've learned being back in Washington, D.C. is you have a lot of fools who are in positions of power. And this is a situation where they've decided that they're going to transition to, quote, green energy, and that's the end of the discussion. This is one of the areas that I have fought back the hardest against the Biden administration because I think that energy poverty is immoral, and I think that government-imposed energy poverty is especially immoral.
And define energy poverty. What does that mean?
Just exactly what it sounds like, that we are having to make choices between putting food on the table, gas in the car, being able to
heat our homes,
go on vacation, heat our homes, all of those things, that you find yourself in a situation where your paycheck doesn't cover what it used to cover because of what the policy positions that are coming out of this administration to increase the cost of energy. So almost every single opportunity that I've had to have NOAA in front of me or the head of the Department of Interior or the head of the Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, whatever it may be, I have focused on this issue of energy poverty because under our form of government in a constitutional republic and the way that our government was framed, we are a government of, by, and for the people. These people work for us. And I know we hear that all the time, and it's kind of a trite statement, but it is the foundation of our government.
Right.
Joe Biden, I do not work for Joe Biden. I do not work for Deb Haaland. I do not work for the head of the EPA. I do not work, none of us do. They work for us. And
right.
I think that it's actually unconstitutional for them to be adopting policies that actually hurt the citizens of this country and are intended to hurt the citizens of this country. Just right now, we've got the Rock Springs RMP, an absolute disaster of a document.
And let's make sure everybody understands.
The Rock Springs Resource Management Plan, and
right.
that was with the Bureau of Land Management.
It basically shuts out anybody, everybody.
On 3.6 million acres of land.
So you can't mine it, you can't graze, you can't recreate on it, nothing.
Oil and gas? No. No. So Tracy Stone Manning was appointed by Biden to be the head of the BLM, and Tracy Stone Manning is an eco-terrorist. In the 1990s, she was involved with those groups who were spiking trees to stop logging in our national forests.
Get out.
Yes,
I
she
didn't know
was.
that.
Absolutely. Tracy Stone Manning is an eco-terrorist, and she's now the head of the Bureau of Land Management. So her only goal is to stop any access, management, and use of federal lands, because that's what she's been working on for 40 years.
So they don't mine or prospect anything. So it's just owned by the government.
It's just owned by the government and really goes to hell. You need grazing, you need development, you need access, you need active management. And then the EPA 2 weeks ago issued their new rule coming out of the Buffalo district office, the RMP that they issued. And what they're trying to do is shut down all coal mining by 2041.
Yeah, go into that. What is that about? Because don't you need coal to power plants?
We need coal to power plants, but everything else, you can't make cement without coal. You can't make steel without coal.
Right.
There is a huge solar facility, and I believe it's in Kansas, and they were going to shut down a coal-fired power plant down there, and this huge solar facility came out and said, can we hold off on that for a while, because we can't actually manufacture solar panels without coal. We have to have coal-fired electricity.
So there is legitimate evidence to the fact that we still need coal. So why doesn't the administration say,
coal is the energy of the future. So I'm sorry, but coal is the energy of the future. You do not have plastics without oil and gas. And there are, if you look at there are basically 3 or 4 constituents that you have to have a civilized society. One of them is fertilizer. One of them is cement. You have to have electricity. The very things that are absolutely you do not have without fossil fuels are what the Biden administration is trying to destroy.
Okay, real quick, because I'm a little ignorant on that. How does fertilizer figure into fossil fuels? You make
natural
fertilizer.
Gas.
Natural gas. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Ammonia. You don't have fertilizer without natural gas.
Okay.
So yeah, all of these things are interrelated, and what you have is an administration that has made the decision that they are going to force us into this transition. And I keep saying there is no such transition. This is absurd. We don't need fewer sources of energy. We need more. If you want to add wind or solar, okay, fine, but that doesn't mean that we still don't need our coal and oil and gas. Here's something that I would like to force them to do. Let's take a community such as Boulder, Colorado, or Bozeman, Montana, and let's have them go first. Let's do a pilot project where they would take out all of their gas stations, take out all of their gas-fired water heaters, take out all of their gas-fired stoves, take away everything that is associated with fossil fuels, including their streets, obviously, because you don't have asphalt and concrete, again, without fossil fuels. And let's just ring those puppies with the wind towers and solar farms. And let's see if it's feasible to do it with a town of 100,000 people, because I will guarantee you 100% it absolutely is not. We are not ever going to be to the point where the only source of energy that we have is wind and solar. It is absurd. It is going to cause such an enormous amount of poverty in the meantime as we fight out this battle. But again, this is the wrong-headedness of the Biden administration going down a road that they know very little about and trying to destroy the industries that are absolutely critical to our prosperity.
I always make the analogy that, on the economy, that he'll say, well, the economy's good. I don't understand. Well, that's because you've got eggheads like Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen, who aren't regular citizens, telling him what the stats say. The stats do say that the economy's doing well, but people, regular, everyday people, aren't feeling it. Can we, going back to the climate stuff, can we be cleaner, greener, whatever you want to call it, but also be energy independent? Can those two things exist?
Absolutely. They already do. Go outside. Step outside. Go hang out at a coal mine near Gillette and tell me how dirty it is.
But there are cities that have smog and that have other things. Can we clean them up as well, do you think?
We already have. Well, you didn't live here, but go to Denver in the 1970s to compare to where we are right now.
Okay.
We've done it. We have done it. It's just that they won't allow us to take the win and move on. We've already done a phenomenal job of cleaning up our environment, taking care of our rivers and waterways, addressing clean air issues. We've already done that. What you find, though, is that the bureaucracy is never willing to relinquish the power.
Right.
So whenever we go in and we actually solve a problem, it's like, yeah, well, we're going to have to create another one. We're going to have to expand our power another way. an example is the EPA now wanting to get into the situation where they oversee all ag production in the United States. The EPA was not created to oversee ag production and development. We have a United States Department of Agriculture, but this is what these agencies do. They expand their feelers, they expand their tentacles into these areas they were never intended to be.
And have no business
being in. And then the next thing they want to do is regulate those businesses out of business.
Right.
And that's just what happens with the bureaucracy. But I'll just tell you a very quick story. My mother is 100 years old. She's going to be 101 years old this year.
Okay.
And I think about her life. She was born in 1923. She was from a dairy farm in Minnesota. She would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They would milk the cows. They spent all of their waking moments attending the garden, canning the food, chopping the wood, basically subsistence. That's what everybody did. And you look at how her life changed. You look at how our lives changed in the last 100 years as compared to the previous thousands upon thousands of years. You look at that 100-year period of time and you compare it to all periods of time before that, and the prosperity is absolutely unrivaled.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the cars that we drive, the homes that we live in, the food that we eat, our life expectancy, the decrease in infant mortality rates, by every single metric, our lives have improved so dramatically in 100 years, and it's because of one thing: the commercial production of affordable energy.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That affects everything.
Yeah.
It affects transportation. It affects your ability to heat your schools. It affects your ability to be to cure cancer.
It gives you air conditioning so you can live in the desert.
It gives you air conditioning. It allows for our ability to do all different kinds of things from a medical standpoint. It helps us to mass produce food so that we can feed more people. Every single metric you look at, it is the commercial production of affordable energy, and this administration has gone to war on that.
I read something the other day which I thought was amazing. Anybody over the age of 90 has seen 85% of the technology in the United States history.
My point.
85% of the technology. Amazing.
My point exactly.
My guest is Harriet Hageman, the representative from Wyoming. We're going to have more Speak Your Piece after this. All right, Speak Your Piece continues now with my guest in studio, Harriet Hageman, and Representative Hageman is here in town. She will be talking to people in the mining industry today and tomorrow, or is it just today?
Today, and then tomorrow I'm heading to Worland.
And heading to Worland. So we thank her for stopping in. Let's talk about the future now. What does if Donald Trump wins, and quite frankly, if you look at all the polls, it looks like he is going to win. What position does that put Congress in? What position does that put you guys in to get stuff done, if you will?
Well, I think it would be absolutely incredible if that's the development this fall, and I'm working every way that I can to make sure that it happens. I am running for re-election because obviously being in the House, I'm up every 2 years. So I'm up for re-election this year. And we have John Barrasso on the Senate side is up for election. If he wins and he gets a leadership position, he would be number 2 in the Senate. So that positions Wyoming in a very good place.
But we don't have the Senate, right? We'd have to win back the Senate. We need to
win the Senate. And I have actually helping Senate candidates as well, because I was just in Ohio to help Bernie Moreno. He's running against, can't think of the guy's name right now, but he's running in Ohio, somebody who's been there for 40 years, somebody that we need, Sherrod Brown, we need to get rid of him. But if we take the Senate, keep the House, and we have the White House, we already have quite a few pieces of legislation that we're ready to move with very, very quickly. We recognize that first 100 days is critical to actually changing this, turning this country around. Sometimes I think of our country as like a big, huge Titanic, and I maybe shouldn't have used that word, but a big, huge a passenger ship, and it takes an awful lot of space to move it in. But we're going to have to move quickly, and we're going to have to address some of these regulations that are being issued. So right now, what you're seeing coming out of the Biden administration is we're just being absolutely buried with regulations, whether it's with the Department of Labor or the EPA or the USDA or the Fish and Wildlife Service, whatever it may be. These agencies are issuing regulations regulations just as fast as they possibly can to try to protect the legacy of the Biden administration, which has just been a failure from beginning to end. So one of the first things we would have to do is move forward to try to reverse a lot of those regulations, such as the Rock Springs RMP, that's still in draft form. They haven't adopted that yet, but this latest one that came out of the Buffalo for that RMP to destroy our coal industry. So there's quite a few of these that we need to move on and try to block from going into effect.
And I know you're working with Governor Mark Gordon too, because he doesn't like the RMP either.
Absolutely
not. He hates it. No, and I understand. You know, Gordon has gotten a lot of flack, and I understand why. You know, carbon capture, all that kind of stuff. But at least he understands. You know, DC doesn't need to tell us how to do stuff.
No,
you know, it doesn't need to infringe upon our ability. Again, it's like somebody calling me up and saying, "Do you know how to run a radio station?"
Well, that's
yes,
exactly
I do.
Right.
I don't need a consultant. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact is that so many of the folks back in Washington, D.C., they're not doing what's right. They're doing what's political.
Right.
And again, it's the expansion of the administrative state. Right now, the administrative state is about $2.1 trillion a year in hidden taxes with all of these various regulations that they're imposing against us. But the other part of this is that inflation is up 20% since Joe Biden took office. In 3.5 years, inflation is up 20%.
No, I thought it went down. I thought it went down a bit.
But it's still up 20%. It didn't go down in terms of going down below where it was at the beginning of his administration.
I see.
It's just not going up as fast. We're still paying 20% more now for a Starbucks coffee than we were 3.5 years ago.
I got you.
We're still paying. If I went in and 3 years ago I paid $80 for a bag of groceries, that bag of groceries is now costing me $100.
Yeah.
So no, the inflation is there, and I happen to live through and remember very well the Jimmy
Carter
years.
administration. Yep.
And it was disastrous, especially for the ag industry and any industry that was highly capitalized. And that's what we're seeing with this administration. So we have a variety of bills that are ready to go, some that we've already passed and we'll bring back up in the 119th. But if we take all three, we are going to have to move very, very quickly to reverse the policies of the Biden administration.
Real quick, can Mike Johnson keep his job, Speaker of the House, or is there too much noise going on?
You know, I don't know. I think he's growing in the job to a certain extent. He just came in November. It has been a difficult year in that regard for the leadership from that standpoint. I would like to see more of a focus on the conservative agenda. I would love to see more of a focus on the conservative agenda.
But how do you get something passed if you need the Democrats' help?
Well, you don't always need the Democrats' help. It depends on whether we're willing to govern as conservatives or not.
I see.
And so I have voted against things such as the continuing resolutions because I actually think that we need to make some extremely difficult decisions about our budget. And just doing continuing resolutions and omnibus spending bills, we're not getting to the brass tacks. We're not addressing the fact that the federal government has got to cut spending. We're $34 trillion in debt, and it gets worse every day. The $95 billion in supplemental funding for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and whatever other grab bag that the Biden administration wanted, I voted against Ukraine. I voted in favor of the Israel funding because we've got a plan of action. We know what they're doing. We know what the goal is. And I also believe that Israel is the tip of the spear in terms of protecting Western civilization from pure barbarity. I voted for that. I voted against the money for Ukraine for a lot of reasons, including graft, including the fact that they won't give us an accounting, including the fact that they won't tell us what the end goal is.
Right.
So I look at every single bill individually and determine how I'm going to vote and what I think is in the best interest of our country and the best interest of Wyoming.
Is it possible to have a balanced budget and not severely alter what we know as our American way of life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The federal government doesn't improve our American way of life. They take money away from us. I mean, the reality is taxation is theft.
Right, but there's so many social programs that
there's
we've got
a lot
now.
of social programs, but the amount of graft, the amount of waste, the amount of abuse in Washington, D.C. alone is just absolutely off the charts. In addition to which, why do we want to give the EPA money to set up its own individual agency that oversees all ag production in the United States? That's a waste of $1 billion right there.
Right.
We have a USDA. The EPA has no business in that.
My guest is Harriet Hageman, representative of Wyoming. This has been great. If you can come back, please do. And good luck to you this weekend, and keep fighting for Wyoming and D.C. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mac.